Hey everybody, and welcome to the latest FF Virtual Arena. Today we are going to be looking at the future of point of sale in a post-Corona world, and what some of the opportunities are going to be, but also what some of the pitfalls could be. So Hamza, you are joining us from the Netherlands. What's the situation like currently in the Netherlands with the whole social isolation and distancing?
Yeah, absolutely. I assume it's similar to most places. It feels like 8 a.m. on January 1st, the streets are deserted. But I think it's different in Amsterdam because it's a city that's fairly small in terms of the uh, geography, the topography, and it's usually full of tourists. So you feel it extra hard. Whereas I think in London it's a bit wider, so and less and more local, so it's a bit less noticeable.
I did see an incredible video of in the Netherlands somebody going down the canal on a boat playing music for the entire street.
That was
This
me
is quite
actually. Yes, I don't know if you. That was my musical talent.
Excellent, excellent. And also joining us, we've got Elena. Elena, I should have done this beforehand, but I'm gonna completely butcher your surname. Elena
Let's not
Mesropyan.
try it. Yes, it's Mesropyan. You didn't butcher it at all.
Oh,
Um,
cool, excellent.
yeah,
From
thanks for.
from Money 2020. Thanks for having us. And you're in central London, right?
Yes, that's right. Thanks for inviting Ali. We're in London, and I think the glamour is wearing off now. This third week is not as interesting as the previous two anymore. But yeah, I think it's just some time to get used to it. But we're all right now. Everyone's working from home. Seems to be going well.
Excellent. Well, today I want to have a look at the future of POS and POS terminals. And I want to look at what the opportunities are. I want to look where there's some potential for growth and innovation. Just to kind of go over a little bit around yourselves, Hamza, can you just give us a little bit of a background around Suburbia?
Sure. So very high level, Suburbia is an alternative data company. That means we collect data from new or hard to access sources, and we process, enrich it, and share it with our users who are economists or researchers. So we're connecting to a number of POS systems. And for us, we're very excited about the future of POS because it means more connected devices, better data, and more data. So that means more insights for us. So we certainly see the potential upsides of new technology entering the sphere.
Excellent. And Elena, in regards to Money 2020, you've my Facebook feed is full of adverts saying that you're ripping up the conference agenda. You really meant it. What is going to be happening with Money 2020 in Europe in September?
We absolutely meant it, and we did change a lot this year. And Money 2020 Europe is going to be the first industry event to leave outdated, isolated topics like you see everywhere, like payments, lending, even point of sale, to be honest, towards bigger industry questions. Because what we found with our delegates, we just undertook a massive amount of research after the last show to find that people are thinking about innovation in that way. They're not thinking about isolated topics. They have real challenges and goals to hit every year in a 3 to 5 year spans as well. And that's what we want to address. That's why we've changed our approach. It's not to say that we're not going to have those topics. We will have them, but they're not the end goal. The end goal is try to help businesses solve the challenges that they have, which is why you see 8 big questions. And all of those questions will be that's everything everyone needs to be asking themselves. And we're not trying to give a definitive answer this year. We want to show how successful companies approach those questions.
Excellent. Well, I mean, the reason I want to look at POS is actually more to do with the contactless limit in the UK and Europe raising to £45 and €50 and the equivalents in Sweden and such. Um, this raise, first of all, I absolutely love it because it wasn't something that was even demanded. It was very proactive. But what does raising the limit up to around this level? What does this mean for both POS in terms of cards, but also in terms of apps?
So yeah, I think it's an extraordinary time, and before it took several years to think of the limit, but now it's just a pandemic pushed it up. I think it opens up a universe of new types of new data about the customer you can shop in retail stores now, and it's a different type of purchases that you make now using contactless. I think that data is very valuable in understanding the behavior and overall financial lives much better, and allows companies to maybe find new kinds of partners and target customers, proximity marketing, for example, and just allows a wider and more sharp, and I'd say sharper view of the customer, because you're including a different type of a purchase than a grocery store now, because the limit just allows an inclusion for all kinds of products with different price range into your purchase.
Yeah, I would agree with Elena. We come at it from a similar angle in that this certainly generates more data, but for us, it's about generating data about the items sold. So in Europe, there's been a big tendency towards cash, and that means that if you're tracking connected devices, we're tracking mobile payments, you miss out on a large amount of transactions. So if people are switching from cash to contactless, that absolutely creates more data. And hopefully it also creates opportunities for more interesting sorts of transactions, because if you're traditionally dealing with cash and then you install a POS which lets you do contactless, there's a higher likelihood that you'll also switch to potentially going online, being able to sell your goods elsewhere. So while this is very convenient for the consumer, I also think it's going to have some pretty big and positive ramifications for retailers.
Do you think that with the limits, people are going to be more inclined to use their card for tapping more, or do you think people are going to be using more of using Google Pay, Apple Pay, etc. from their devices?
Yeah, this is a really interesting behavioral question. I would assume that you transfer from one to the other. You can almost think of it as an entryway drug. You start off by just tapping your card. Then you see, hey, tapping is okay. I'll start doing it with my phone. And then before you know it, maybe you never pull out your card anymore. Maybe this is the first step towards a cardless future.
Yeah, I would agree. Although I don't think it's as fast as we generally tend to estimate, but that certainly has an impact on your behavior once you get used to a higher limit and making a purchase, a higher ticket purchase with a card, and seeing that you don't have to insert anything, that then you'll think, well, I'm not going to take my card out. I can buy whatever it is in a furniture store or something. Let's imagine the crazy future, just with your phone. So yeah, I do agree that it will have an impact, although I think it's going to be slower than anticipated.
So with that in mind, obviously you guys at Suburbia are quite focused on it. It's about getting data for customers en masse as opposed to just the individual. What gets you more data? People tapping with a card, or people using the phone, or is it irrelevant to you?
For us, what gets us more data is more connected stores. So as soon as someone switches from their offline POS system that they've had for the last 30 years to one of the new cloud linked suppliers, that starts generating data for us. So that's what we're really excited by. Whether they do it via their phone or via their card isn't super relevant. For us, it's just let's move towards the future of payments. And I certainly think that increasing the limit from 25 to 50 gets us there. I almost wonder, rather than looking to the future, should we be looking at the past? What happened when credit cards were introduced? Did credit cards initially have a very small limit, and then it went to 1,000 euros, then it went to 25,000 euros, and now people can purchase a car on their Amex? Are we going to see contactless moving in the same direction? I wonder.
I'm loving the concept of the connected store. I think that's a really nice part of it. It's also it provides an opportunity for companies that want to see the data about the behavior of customers that are not just buying from them, but from a range of other companies, to try and see patterns. So if you could see that the customer that buys at your store a particular item is also inclined to buy another item at a different store, there's an opportunity for partnership with those companies to try and cross promote. So I think there's also a revenue generating opportunity there, and that sounds amazing that you're able to see that across merchants.
I also think you hit the nail on the head that if you're I've got to do a little plug. Our magazine editor Sue, her other half runs a Italian restaurant, an Italian or Sardinian restaurant. Sorry, Sue, I might have got that wrong. And they've obviously had to pivot quite rapidly from being predominantly accepting cash face to face, and they're now almost entirely doing it through delivery. So they've had to quickly be able to accept online orders. So I think moving to being able to away from cash to accept a POS terminal was almost almost like a gateway to accepting online payments. And I think increasing the limit obviously increases the tendency for people to think, do you know what, we need to get whatever card reader it is, and that then pushes them onto online as well.
Right, and then sometimes people make a case for fraud. It's very minimal even now. It's something like the last number I saw was 2.5 p out of every £100 on contactless, which is it's an extremely minimal fraud, and it doesn't. I don't see it with an increase of the limit. I don't see it being a major obstacle, but that really depends on the risk appetite of companies that take the liability.
I should point out my gran. She keeps her contactless card wrapped in silver foil, which I absolutely love. Okay, well here's the scenario. It's 2025. Kanye West is president. We have flying skateboards, and Brexit is still in negotiations. Where do you think we are now? What seems to be getting traction, and what from a POS standpoint? What do you think the world is going to look like? What do you think the kind of average SME mom and pop shop is going to look like in terms of payments?
Sure, I will very quickly say that we may not have to wait until 2025 with the rise of companies like SumUp, like Square, like PayPal moving into physical space. The mom and pop store is now potentially more disruptive and more future forward than some of the traditional stores. For instance, in the Netherlands, you have some large supermarket chains which don't accept Amex because they're linked to a very old POS, whereas mom and pop stores, because they're working with SumUp or Lightspeed or one of these other companies, they're able to accept everything. So I think by 2025, it's going to be the mom and pop stores that are leading the digital revolution while the incumbents struggle to catch up.
You're 100% right there. You always think, it's going to be the John Lewis's and the Aldis kind of sort of pushing, but it's not. It's the little nimble ones.
Right. I think also from perspective of companies that are providing those solutions, to me it seems like it could be free at some point, because the adoption doesn't necessarily always depend on the customer. It also depends on the business that they provided, and for small businesses and micro merchants, it can be expensive. So you could see sometimes companies just asking customers to pay in cash because that's cheaper for them to accept in cash than pay a transaction fee. So I think if a point of sale solution is a bundle of software and hardware becomes free for them, it may also push them towards accepting those payments. Even if over time you introduce a payment or any sort of fee for using those devices, it's entirely possible that the industry after this crisis will just help everyone to get to that level of adoption that may be required. And I think that it's not too far-fetched to say that the device itself and just the whole solution may be free, and the companies will need to find a different way to deliver value to their customers, to end users and to merchants, namely through data, through the use of data.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. If you look in Asia, for instance, over there, even the smallest merchant has a way of accepting Alipay, paying through a QR code. So if a merchant whose revenue is probably, I'm going to make an assumption, of 50 euros a month, and if they're able to switch to digital, there's no reason for a smaller shop in the Netherlands or in the UK to be held back by fees, because it's clearly possible elsewhere, and it's got to be possible here eventually.
I think there's also interesting companies that are completely just forgoing this whole the point of sale. There are companies who are bringing from North America, and there is a company in Europe that allow from between a merchant and a person a phone transaction. So if you're a business, literally an artist, or let's say festivals are best use case there, you don't really even need any solution or any device. You can accept a phone payment from another phone as a business and get it deposited on your account. So that sounds quite fascinating to me as well, that we can actually skip the whole step of a point of sale device and find a different way of using the data from transactions phone to phone.
Do you think that in a similar way to to the way that cloud has effectively changed the way that we operate technology. You don't have, if you want to run a website, you don't have to have a big server. You can literally go onto Wix or GoDaddy or whatever it may be and be running a website in a few minutes. Do you think that POS is going to go the same way, where individuals are able to, when I say individuals, I mean small businesses, are able to make use of things like Square, things like SumUp, but also to do a bit like what Amazon has done and leverage the data, leverage the information there? Because I think payments is a very small amount of information that you're able to gather, but the everything else that you can connect with that is invaluable. And if you can scale that up as a small business, that could be fantastic.
Yeah, I think you always have to be careful about privacy. So for Suburbia, the first question is not can it be done? The question is should it be done? So we're very sensitive on what kind of data we collect and don't collect. And I think if we're going to scale this to multiple users, then we have to consider about the ethical quandaries about who gets access to which data.
One of the things that I remember, Hamza, you said that weirdly stuck with me in terms of the way that you deal with data is it's not about collecting information as an individual. It's about collecting it as almost market research. It's about collecting it as a group so you can ask various questions. And I think as people become more and more data aware, Cambridge Analytica, etc., I think that's going to be a mark of trust, that if people pass their data on.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to stop thinking about the who. We have to start thinking about the what, the where, the how. There's so much data out there that's also very valuable and will give us insights about, for example, let's take the impact of the coronavirus and the pandemic. When will the economy start to recover? You don't need to know what individuals are doing to find out. You just have to look at what's the broader retail landscape doing. And you want to be able to do it fast, and you want to be able to do it accurately, but you don't need to deal with the individual's information. So with Suburbia, we're very happy to say that we were able to track the impact of the corona pandemic without having to depend on individual users' information. And there's a world of other use cases out there as well.
That must have been quite bizarre, sort of going, oh, actually, we can see that this country is panic buying toilet roll faster than this country, or whatever it may be. There must be some crazy data insights there.
Yeah, we can see, for example, regions where the corona broke out first versus regions where it hasn't really taken off yet, and you still see the same kind of behavior. So people are still being very proactive and careful, and that's really good to see. So that actually gives you hope about how we're going to tackle these sorts of issues, because people everywhere are behaving smarter and safer, not just in regions which were the source of the outbreak. So that's really positive to see in the data.
To be honest, I think the matter of trust is very contextual. It's not a universal, and privacy as well. It's not a universal metric for all markets. So maybe Europe and Asia and America, North America and South America, they see the matter of trust and privacy in very different ways. So sometimes we apply a blanket of privacy assumption on all markets, but maybe in North America, the matter of privacy, it becomes less important once you start getting more value out of your data. So if a customer can see more value delivered to them, although with more use of their data or much richer data, it's possible that there's a threshold where they'll think, well, it's fine, I'll forgo this data, but I see the value and I see the return on it. So I think it's very very contextual for markets, and Europe is vastly different from North America in that sense, how we perceive privacy and trust. I think there's something there as well. So if companies that are global can contextualize the trust to different markets, maybe the variation of how they use the data could actually deliver value to those companies and to customers as well.
With that in mind, Elaine, obviously you must see all sorts of proposals and sessions and companies putting themselves forward for Money 2020 around the world. Do you think there's been a kind of an increase in organizations that are looking to do things with data at point of sale? And do you think that is more regional focused, or is it more of kind of a us as a globe moving forward? Yeah,
so we do receive thousands of applications for Money 2020 shows, and it's incredibly valuable information, and we're just very fortunate to be able to see it all, the big picture. I'd say there is more applications to what companies can do with data, including the point of sale, various interesting ways and types of data that they're using, a lot of overlaps as well. But with payments and with point of sale, I'd say there is more interest in using local payments methods and local data on customers. There seems to be more interesting companies that are doing something locally, even as in a particular country or let's say in a region, because they can understand the spending patterns in that region. But because they're not a global company yet, it would take them a lot of research and a lot of resources to understand what are the patterns in different markets. So you have to do the research to understand the local payments methods and what it means. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Well, I want to let's look at the other side, because I love paying by card. I love paying by phone. I mentioned my gran earlier with her card wrapped in silver foil. She loves cash. She'll be using cash till doomsday. How can mom and pop shops, I love saying mom and pop shops, how can mom and pop shops remain and become technologically efficient but still cater for everyone, and still not leave anyone left behind from a payments perspective, but also from a data gathering perspective? Because that's a big group of people, and not even just socially that you want to make sure they can make payments, but also gather data with a capitalist hat on. That's a huge opportunity there. So what can be done from a data gathering perspective for people like my gran that love using cash?
There's a couple of things to consider. First is that if you're dealing with non-personal transactions, then you can also look at cash transactions, card transactions. For example, our CPG data set, which tracks products sold in bars and restaurants, we don't see any information about the individual. So we only see that a Heineken was purchased for €3. It doesn't matter to us whether that was paid for with cash or with card, whether the person who purchased it was 80 years old or 18 years old. So that's one aspect of it. The other, which I think is more interesting, is what role does the government have to play in the shift away from cash? Are there societal disadvantages, for example, fraud and losing money? Are these costs worth incurring to keep cash around, or should we deal with the pain of having people switch from cash to digital? And you never know. I think the older generation is often able to move very quickly. Look at how many people on Facebook are older. So I think if there's a concerted push away from cash, maybe everyone will be able to join, and the societal costs of switching away from cash may be worth the eventual benefits.
I don't think it's just a technological element. I think there is. I think we're seeing a lot of people, older people, for example, using Zoom at the moment. But there's still almost, again, it comes back to the context of trust, of whether or not they want to be using card and such.
Yeah, so the question is, who do they trust to, if a company tells them don't use cash, they may not be convinced. If the government tells them don't use cash, maybe they're more likely to trust them. So where is the authority that will help us move into a cashless future?
Yeah, I think the authority is in general just forced to be a bit more mindful of the natural behavior of different generations. So for example, different cities have, New York, when I lived in New York, I saw a number of stores and then restaurants there they're not accepting cash anymore, but very shortly after, the government forced them to accept cash. So the government's position, while I do understand that cash has its cost on society, I think the government's position is right to be very mindful and slow in this regard. This is the only case where a large part of society would be excluded if we were to force technological advancements without considering their natural behavior. And behavioral patterns are very different. So I would absolutely agree that there are different kinds of data and different sources that can be used to better understand their behavior. And with better understanding their behavior, how they pay for their utilities, or how they receive their pensions and manage their money and finances in general, we would be able to maybe introduce them to new to other types of services that are used now. So it's just, to me, it's an absolute necessity to be very mindful of their behavior, and I would actually put authorities in a place where they are the ones that are stopping or pausing exclusion of cash from transactions, because that actually has a negative impact on a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do. It's quite somewhat similar. I see it as the insurance market. In the U.S., you don't need insurance. In Europe, in a lot of countries, you have a mandate to purchase insurance. In some countries, you get insurance by the government. So, can we think about access to insurance and access to cash, and consider how different governments react to that? Because of course, you want to make sure that everyone is included. But how do governments think about that, and how will that affect the payments industry as a whole? I think it's a very interesting, not just an interesting question, but I think it's going to be a lot of different questions in a lot of different countries.
That's a great point, a great and amazing example with insurance. So the insurance that's provided by the government in a number of countries, I know in Nordics it's and then from my country, I'm from Russia as well, the insurance is provided by the government, and no one yet died from a serious disease because they know they're secure and the government is insuring them. While when you have private insurance and there is no security from authorities, there's actually a significant risk, and people are more indebted because they carry that medical debt around. So I think it's very similar in payments as well. The government has to act as a main protector here of those who are most vulnerable.
So I think it was actually at Money 2020 in Vegas last year when Uber was talking about Uber Money. One of the questions that was brought up was about cash, because Uber is a company that does accept cash, but because of the way it's done in-app, you tap it on cash, and they still, of course, have that information about where that customer has been to. So there are various ways to do that, still but maintain the data, still enhance the customer experience that way, but still be able to cater for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, right. So lastly, 2020 now, what should retailers, banks, tech firms, what should they be doing today to prepare themselves for the future of POS? What, especially when they've got a bit of not downtime, but a bit of almost research and data time. What should they be doing now so that they can be prepared for the future, but also so they can hit the ground running when some of the restrictions ease off?
I think for retailers, it's actually an excellent time to reevaluate what the value that you're delivering to your customers, and whatever is normal today, although forced by the pandemic, for example, forfeiting some fees, delaying payments, providing some services for free, that should become the new baseline when we are out of this crisis. The reality will be different. The customer will be used to a different kind of service. So the premium should become your baseline. And right now is the time to understand if your premium and whatever you're charging for right now is the baseline, what is it that you're delivering, and what is the value that you're generating for your customer, and where can you make revenue on it. So I think understanding behavioral patterns from financial data, trying to find the right partners, knowing your customer much better. This is the opportunity. This is the time to use it, to use that data and understand your customer better and build the right relationships with companies so that when we're out of the crisis, you know that you are much more competitive. While others are returning to charging the fees, you can actually start generating revenue in a different way because you figured out something about your customer that others didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about being connected. It's about going digital. It was happening anyway, but I hope that this switch makes it clear that digital is coming. And you can either start thinking about it proactively, how do we leverage data in a way that's safe and valuable, or you can miss out on a very interesting opportunity and time. There's a tidal wave swimming, and I think there's a tidal wave coming, and our organizations have to ask themselves, can we swim or not? And this is a great time to be taking swimming lessons.
I like that a lot. Cool. Excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining me today, guys. Where can we find out a little bit more about you?
Oh yeah, you can find out a lot more about Money 2020 at money2020.com, where we have published our agenda, the first version, recently, and right now we're just plowing through our applications and accepting and approving new speakers. But our agenda, the main thing I want to say about our agenda is a living agenda, and you can absolutely participate. I'd say go to money2020.com, to our Europe website, and just provide feedback. we collect feedback continuously and we do research continuously with our delegates. And it's very important for us that everyone participates in building our agenda, because we're not making any gut choices about what's important. We want to understand what's important for our audience, including yourselves. So please participate, give us feedback, and share your thoughts on what you think important topics are this year.
Great. And Suburbia is suburbia.io. Send me a message, hamza@suburbia.io. We're always looking for companies with interesting data sets, companies in the payment space, companies who are merchants, retailers. We're always looking for new partners, and we want to encourage people to find out more about how to use data safely and in a way that's valuable. So we'd love to hear from any of the FinTech Finance readers and viewers.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. We'll catch up with you soon.
Great.
Thank you, Ali.